Cool. So let's kick off. Good afternoon, guys. Welcome to, I guess this must be our 10th day, isn't it? 9th or 10th day, something like that. Rule 10, traffic separation schemes. It's quite a long rule, but it's quite a straightforward rule. And in many ways, it's very similar to the narrow channels rule, except with a few specific parts which are only used in traffic separation schemes. We'll do exactly what we've done before. We'll go through section by section and just make sure we've got a full understanding of it and talk about some of the intricacies as we do so. So part one, this rule applies to traffic separation schemes adopted by the organisation and does not relieve any vessel of her obligation under any other rule. So this rule only applies to traffic separation schemes adopted by the organisation. Who wants to tell me what the organisation is?
The International Maritime something.
Organisation.
There we are. Yeah.
Yeah, the International Maritime Organisation, which is a subset of the UN. It's based in London, and it says when a traffic separation scheme is going to be set up and agrees the parameters of it and lays it down somewhere. Now, I couldn't find out where it was laid down, but I did find a very useful page on Wikipedia, which has got the information and sucks it from. So you can, if you look up traffic separation schemes adopted by the IMO, you can find out where they all are. And it wouldn't surprise you to know that they are only in places where you've got high traffic density. And so the middle picture there is the Dover Straits, and you can see the density of traffic moving through there, which is why there's a requirement for traffic separation schemes. Other places where you're likely to find them, Singapore Straits, Malacca Straits, Straits of Gibraltar, anywhere where you've got lots and lots of shipping coming together, they're specifically to try and avoid the situation, to make it simpler for ships to navigate to and through those tight bottlenecks. That make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And then the second part of this opening paragraph says, these rules refer to traffic separation schemes, but they don't stop you as having to follow the rules which are laid down in the rest of the package. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
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 Okay, so where are the TSSs around the UK? Just on the south coast here, this is a slide of the English Channel. Let me just pull up my laser pointer. We had a look at the Dover traffic separation scheme in detail, but you can see there's a very complex series of traffic separation schemes, and they actually run well up the east coast, almost to Harwich. And then there's a blank area between Cherbourg and the Isle of Wight. Then there's another TSS off the Channel Islands. It's called the Casquettes traffic separation scheme. And then another one down towards Brest, and then a series of traffic separation schemes which organise traffic around the Scilly Isles. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So in between, particularly in the English Channel, people get a little bit confused as to what's a TSS and what's a shipping lane. So only the TSS rules, which we're going to discuss today, only apply in TSSs. So only in the Casquettes TSS, which I'm outlining here with the pointer. Only in the Dover Straits TSS. Only within the zone which is covered by the pink on this chart. Does that make sense? Outside of that, so in this area here, south of the Isle of Wight, so it's between Brighton and Portland, this whole area here, that isn't a TSS. That's just shipping lanes, and they're different. So when we talk about the rules about what we have to do when we're in TSSs, we need to be cognizant of whether we're in a TSS or we're in a shipping lane. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Yeah.
The second part of the rule says the vessel using a traffic separation scheme shall proceed in the appropriate traffic lane in the general direction of flow for that lane. Perfectly clear, yeah? Just like a motorway or a dual carriageway, you don't drive down the wrong carriageway. And the carriageway is always marked up with helpful arrows which show you the general direction of the flow. Straightforward?
Yeah.
Insofar as practical, keep clear of a traffic separation line or a traffic separation zone. So the traffic separation zone is this zone between the two channels of traffic, and the separation lines, the demarcations of the TSS. So what it's saying is basically don't drive on the hard shoulder or don't drive on the central reservation. but perfectly straightforward. The reason it's saying that is similar to the reason why we don't do it normally, is that it's a zone of safety for vessels which are in difficulties. The separation zone is anyway. So if you're having difficulties in the scheme with your engines, you can get out of the scheme and anchor or try and get out of the traffic flow, so you're not going to be causing a further problem. So if you're operating in there normally, you're going to cause that's going to become a problem for other vessels, isn't it? And the reason you don't navigate near traffic separation lines is because it makes it very difficult to assess whether you're in the traffic separation scheme or you're not in the traffic separation scheme. So it would be like walking along. So if you're walking along as a pedestrian, balancing on the curb, you're putting yourself in a very vulnerable situation, and you're making it unclear for cars whether you're about to cross the road or not. Does that make sense? In the same way, if you're not clearly out of the traffic separation scheme, you're making it complicated for vessels using it. Happy?
Yeah.
And then the final part says normally leave or join the traffic lane at the termination of the lane. So at the beginning, or this, and then you leave it at the end. And when joining or leaving from either side, should do so at a smaller angle to the general direction of flow as practicable. So if you were coming from a port where my pointer is here, to the north of the TSS, you wouldn't join it, comes due south and then turn right. You'd come south and then angle yourself and join it at a smooth angle, so that once you're in it, you were traveling in the general direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
And what you should also not do is travel along a traffic separation scheme and then cut across right at the end, because you're making it awkward for vessels joining here. Happy days? A vessel shall, so far as practical, avoid crossing traffic lanes, but if obliged to do so, shall cross on a heading as nearly as practicable to right angles to the general direction of traffic flow. So, what's the first paragraph of the paragraph saying there?
Oh, it's practical.
Yeah, it's basically saying don't cross traffic separation schemes. And then in the second phrase of the paragraph, it's saying if you need to, do so on a heading as near as practical at right angles to the general direction of flow. So I've highlighted a number of words in red there. The first one, which we're considering, is heading. I've decided that's an important word to discuss. Why do we think heading's an important word?
You have to take into account, I suppose, the tide and the wind and the fact that you're not get quite across as straight as you think you will.
Kind of. So that was Richard, was it?
Yeah.
When you say you should take it into account, well, so on the top diagram there's two vessels, one's following the red line and the other following the green line.
Yeah.
I'd have said that the one following the red line has taken into account the tidal stream. Can you see that? It's adjusted its heading.
Yeah.
So it's going on a course. So the course that it's following is directly across the traffic separation scheme. That's wrong. So it should be on a heading at right angle. So if you look at the one on the right, it's pointing 90 degrees across the TSS. And the tide is taking it down to the east, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it shouldn't take into account tide and wind. It should just go 90 degrees to the general direction of flow. Does that make sense?
Well, it knows it's going to not go in that direction. It knows that it's going to be, it knows that tide and wind will move it to an angle.
Yeah, yeah. You would need to take that into account. I'm just being absolutely clear that the reason heading's important is because it's the heading, the way the boat is pointing, that you have to follow.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is actually this green route is quicker than this red route. So it'll cross, although it's traveling a longer distance, the boat pointing this way and propelling itself this way will cross the TSS faster than a vessel steering into tide. So it reduces the amount of time you're in the traffic separation scheme. And the other thing it does, it makes sure you're showing an absolutely clear aspect. So this vessel here is clear at all times that he's at 90 degrees to the flow, isn't it? If this guy on the left, the guy following the red track, had to adjust a little bit further, he might, to some vessels, show both his port and starboard navigation lights. In which case, it's unclear what he was doing, whether he's travelling down the traffic separation scheme or crossing. That makes sense?
Yep.
Now, the second part I've highlighted in red is nearly as practicable at right angles to the general direction of traffic flow. If we're a sailing vessel, and the wind's coming from the north in this case, we sail on a heading directly into wind.
No.
So if that was what we had to do, what could we, and we needed to cross the TSS. So the first paragraph or first phrase of the paragraph is saying should avoid crossing, but let's say that for whatever reason we needed to cross the TSS, the wind was coming from directly the direction we need to be heading. What could we do?
Take the sails down.
Take the sails down and motor, yeah? Let's say our engine doesn't work, or we're on a yacht without an engine, or our engine works, but it only really propels us at 1 or 2 knots. So it's an engine which is designed for manoeuvring in harbour. For whatever reason, it doesn't. So you get this quite a lot with outboards on the back of boats. They don't, once you're in a seaway, you don't get proper traction from them, so they're not practical out in open water. Or a lot of old boats have got engines which really only help them push them along at a couple of knots, designed to get them into the harbour at the end. So if we were in one of those boats, what could we do? So the basis here is we need to cross the TSS, and the wind is coming from the direction which would be on our heading. Do the rules give us the a get out where we can do it?
It's not practical, I guess.
Well, it's so the heading is near as practicable.
Do we choose the tack which is closest to a right angle?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we have to consider. So it might, if the wind is slightly west of north, then a port tack would be closer to the right angles, wouldn't it? I'll draw that for you just to make that perfectly clear.
Yeah, it makes sense. Makes sense.
So if that was the wind there, in this case, the closest heading a boat could go would be something like that, close hauled, wouldn't it? Does that make sense on the port? Yeah. Happy?
Yeah.
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 The fourth part of the rule, a vessel should not use an inshore traffic zone when she can safely use the appropriate traffic lane within the adjacent traffic separation scheme. However, vessels of less than 20 metres in length, sailing vessels and vessels engaged in fishing may use the inshore traffic zone. The inshore traffic zone is shown quite clearly on the two slides here. So here's a TSS running north-south into the channel, and on the left here we've got an inshore traffic zone, and on the right we've got an inshore traffic zone, and they're more clearly. And so what it's saying is, most traffic, if it was proceeding from the west and heading up towards this channel, wouldn't be allowed to use the inshore traffic zone if they can safely use the normal traffic lane. So vessel coming out from the, I'll show you the bigger chart in a minute, we'll look at it, would have to come up here and here. But because we're a sailing yacht or a yacht less than 20 meters, or we're fishing, then we're free to use the inshore traffic zone. So an analogy would be, it would be like a rule which said that trucks were only allowed to use motorways unless it was not safe for them to be on the motorway, or they were, but small cars and motorbikes could use the A roads around motorways. Does that make sense? So the inshore traffic zone is like A roads that are connecting, that are inside of the motorway. Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah.
Notwithstanding what we've just talked about, a vessel may use an inshore traffic zone when en route to or from a port, offshore installation or structure, pilot station or other place situated within the inshore traffic zone or to avoid immediate danger. So using my previous analogy, I'm a truck driver driving around the M25. I have to stay on the motorway, but if I have to deliver something to Crawley, I can get off and use the A roads to get me to Crawley. Does that make sense? Don't know why I pulled Crawley out of the top of my head from, but you can use the inshore traffic zone to navigate to structures, places within it. But if you're transiting past it, you should stay in the TSS. Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah.
So if I was a vessel, a container vessel traveling up to Port Rampton, coming from the west, I'd have to travel down the traffic separation scheme in the general direction of flow here. Then I'm going to have to follow this roundabout, come around here, cross at 90 degrees, come all the way up here, and then I can go, then I can leave, and then I can go to Port Rampton. If I was a sailing vessel, I can come up here, stay in the inshore zone, cross here, then I can go to Port Rampton. We'll discuss about how we should make our approach to Port Rampton on one of the next slides. Is that perfectly clear, guys?
Yeah, there's no restriction direction of travel when you're in the inshore.
No.
Right.
A vessel other than a crossing vessel or a vessel joining or leaving a lane shall not normally enter a separation zone or cross a separation zone except in a case of an emergency or to engage in fishing with a separation zone. So, a good example would be if we were sailing from the Irish Sea to get down into English Channel, and we'd our court, we wouldn't be able to cut across here and then sail down the zone, down the centre of this zone. Does that make sense? If we were fishing, we'd be entirely happy, we'd be allowed to fish in there, but we can't sail down that central reservation. Does that make sense?
Okay.
What we could do...
You're saying you have to go around the Isles of Scilly then?
Well, no, there's actually an inshore zone here.
Okay. Or
we could sail in the direction of general flow in this lane here, which is how I went down the TSS last time I went down it. I was right on the edge, but I sailed just along on the TSS along there. But what I couldn't have done is gone down the central part, or I couldn't have gone against the direction of flow.
Normally, you couldn't go down the border either.
Sorry?
And you couldn't go down the border either.
Oh, I was right on the border, so I shouldn't have been in the border, but I was right on the edge. So it was just enabled so I could get out of the way of anyone steaming down on the same line as me. So I wasn't navigating on the border, but I could get out of the TSS if I wanted to very quickly. The reason being is there's just on this side of the TSS here, in the inshore zone, there's a lot of rocks, and the weather was very rough. It was night time or just approaching dusk as I came down here. These were going to be very difficult to spot. They weren't very well lit. So in order to give myself the safe margin of navigation, I decided to go down the edge of the TSS. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mike, are there ever any physical markings on the TSSs in the water? I mean,
there might be buoys and Raycon devices which mark that. So in the English Channel around Dover, yeah, there are lots which mark the extreme extremity to help you navigate. But not in generally, no. It's just like open water. You can't see where it begins or ends.
Yeah.
The only way that you know where you are is to relate your position to the chart. Does that make sense? So
yes.
you have to update your position and compare it to the image of the TSS overlaid on the chart or the radar, or whatever you're using to navigate, and to determine whether you're inside or out of it.
Yeah.
Which is why this is an important rule. So vessel navigating in areas near the terminations of traffic separation schemes should do so with particular caution. And the reason that's important is because a vessel coming down here, you might be navigating here, so crossing the edge of the scheme. So let's say you want to go from South Douglas Eye and you've sailed out from the anchorage and you're coming down somewhere down in the south. So you don't want to cross the TSS, so you've come down here and you're just nipping right, and you're happy, you're navigating right outside, just on the edge of the TSS here. But a vessel here navigating with it, got to monitor his position and then work out where you are to work out whether you're a crossing vessel or whether you're outside the TSS. So he's got to do a third order of problem solving. So if you shouldn't navigate that way, you should give it a broad clearance, and in any event, navigate with caution, because it's not clear that this guy even appreciates whether you're in or out of it, because he's got to do quite a lot of work to make that appreciation happen. Albeit that with AIS and electronic plotting and things like that, it's quite easy for them. It's much easier for them to do. You can't assume that's all working and that the brain of the officer watch is in gear. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A vessel shall, so far as practical, avoid anchoring in a TSS or in the areas near its terminations. Common sense, yes. So in the same way, you don't park on dual carriageways or motorways or decide that you're going to have your picnic on the hard shoulder. Dangerous or confusing to anchor in or around TSSs. Happy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, a vessel not using a traffic separation scheme shall avoid it by as wide a margin as practicable. Comes back to the point we were just talking about towards the end, and the fact that it's not marked on the chart, it's not marked on in real life. There's no physical boundary to see whether something's in or out of it. So if you're keeping well clear of it, it's obvious what you're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
A vessel engaged in fishing shall not impede the passage of a vessel following a traffic lane. So we've talked about impede before. What did impede mean in narrow channels, guys? Or not to impede?
Not to go anywhere near.
Yeah, just stay out of the way. So we're talking proper social distancing here. You see another vessel. If you're a fishing vessel, then you should steer well clear of the vessel in the traffic lane, which is doing its lawful business. And then a vessel of less than 20 metres in length or a sailing vessel shall not impede the safe passage of a power-driven vessel following a traffic lane. Okay, so most of the time we're in vessels of 20 metres in length or less, or sailing vessels. So the same saying, we should not get in the way of vessels which are following a traffic separation lane.
Yeah.
Happy? What about if you're a sailing vessel which is 120 metres long?
How long?
120 meters, 120 feet rather.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what, 40 meters, something like that, 40, 50 meters.
Well, that still be a sailing vessel. It's not.
Still a sailing vessel, yeah. Unless it engages its engines and it's then a power-driven vessel, yeah. A vessel restricting her ability to manoeuvre when engaged in an operation for the maintenance or safety of the navigation and traffic separation scheme is exempted from complying with the rules to the extent necessary to carry out the operation. So that would be a vessel which is surveying the traffic separation scheme, You get that a lot in the Dover Straits because the shifting sandbanks or fixing buoys or moving markers or something like that. Those vessels will be exempted from following the rules, and they would broadcast their position and provide a lot of warning about what they were doing and where they were doing it. And then the second phrase here is a vessel restricting her ability to maneuver when engaged in an operation for laying, servicing or picking up of submarine cables within a traffic separation scheme is exempted from complying with the rule to the extent necessary to carry out the operation. So do we all understand what submarine cables are?
No.
It's, so any cable which is laid along the seabed is a submarine cable or pipeline.
Ah.
It's not the things that submarines attach themselves to pull themselves around the ocean.
Who was suggesting it was?
That would be a good one.
So you can see it's a cable and wireless vessel or something like that, and it's got big drums of cable on the deck, and it's laying out along the ocean bed. So this is how we talked to, or before pre-satellite, this was the way that all our communications were passed to the US. And there's a lot of work going on in the Solent at the moment, laying electric cable to France, and so lots and lots of survey work going on there, doing that kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So I've got a problem for you guys to have a quick consultation and come up with some ideas about. So we're going from Guernsey, which is down here, to Dartmouth, which is up here. The wind is northwest 4 to 5, and just based on the fact that we're doing traffic separation schemes, what are some of the problems and issues that you might be thinking about just regarding traffic separation schemes?
Avoiding it.
Yeah. Okay. What would be your strategy to avoid it, Janet?
I'd tack on a northeasterly to start with, so that when I get to the traffic separation scheme or near it, I can then tack away and avoid it to the west.
So start off. So you're coming from Guernsey. You're going northeast.
Then I tack to the northwest to avoid Alderney.
The wind's northwest, so we can go west probably.
Yep. And then I probably would tack a little bit further back towards the northeast, and then I could tack away to the northwest or to the west again.
Okay, who's done a lot of sailing around the Channel Islands?
Well, if that was the wrong answer, I've got to put my hand up and say, yes, I have done a lot of sailing.
No, it's right. I'm just going to bring another problem out. So we've noted the problem with the wind. What is the other problem that we have around the Channel Islands, which now
tides can push you?
Yeah.
Tide.
If we tack here, having given, so that's about 5 or 6 miles, which we've given clear. We're tacking up, and the tide is going to be taking us. We want to think about what the tide's doing us, whether it's taking us to or from. So it might be, depending on what the tidal streams are doing, that actually the way out of here is to come up through Alderney and then tack here. That might be the fastest route sometimes.
Yeah.
Other times you'll
go south.
Yeah, other times you're absolutely right. So if you can time your tide window so that you're doing something like that, and then you tack when the tide starts to bring you back this way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Depending on what your SOA is along here. So it can be what's a really nice, straightforward 60-mile passage can be really quite complicated to plan around this area here, because the tides coming out of Guernsey and through Alderney Race, and then the way they flow up and down here don't always work together. So it's an interesting one to have a look at.
So if you, despite your best efforts, you ended up 50% along the side of the TSS going north, so now you've got a problem. You've got to go one way or the other to stay out of it. Is it reasonably practical, as far as reasonably practical, to actually say, oh, well, I'll just go straight through it heading at 90 degrees?
Yeah, you can cross. You are allowed to cross the TSS. So I've done that as well. So I've been on a boat which has come out here, and we were trying to cut up this way. So it was why were we doing that? It was a very strong northeasterly and spring tides. So we wanted to come out of Guernsey, but we didn't want to go through the Alderney race because it was too rough and dangerous. So we came around the outside of Alderney, and then we were sailing. Our plan was to sail up and then cross to go to Weymouth. But it just because of the sea state, and we would stay here, so we just needed to cross. So we crossed about here, and we were not quite on 90 degrees, but our tack was about 20 degrees off a heading 90 degrees. But that was within the rules as well.
So I had a very similar situation, and unfortunately, I'm an ex-lawyer, and I had 2 other lawyers on board. We went to check the rules as we were heading up to go straight through the middle at 90 degrees until we saw the words so far as reasonably practical. And there's about a 2-hour wait while we debated the words. And then we went through.
Don't sail with lawyers.
Yeah. But for lots of reasons.
Mike.
Sorry, who is that? With a question.
Peter.
Go on then, Peter.
That first example you gave, please, when you went around to the east of the TSS, you did a big circle round to the right, to the east, sort of like a big anti-clockwise circle.
This one here?
Yeah. You started off and you said...
We came out of Guernsey.
Yeah.
This was Janet's solution, yeah?
Oh, yes. No, actually, I thought she went west.
Yeah,
I think it was your suggestion to go through the Alderney race and then loop back
Yeah,
to the west.
If you put yourself from Guernsey at the right time here, you can find yourself up through the race and here in about an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Yeah.
So even that's about 25, 30 miles. But if you've got 5 or 6 knots of tide and you're pushing 6 to 7 knots yourself with the wind, it surprised me a northwesterly forward 5 and a nice tide with you'd fly through here. That would take you about an hour and a half.
Yeah, I was actually talking about the next bit, when you get a bit where you are now. If you had a strong tide coming out of the channel, would you avoid going around to the east in case you get pushed into it?
Yeah, you need to look at what the timing of the race. So if when the tide's setting through here, so from Guernsey to Alderney, you've got about 4 hours where the tide's setting you well to the east. So if we say we leave here, gets 2 hours to here, then we stay on the tack and we're making good progress because we're on a beam reach. This is about 20 miles.
Yeah.
We're going to be over here by the time we come to tack. Now we're coming down here with the tide. So we've got 6 hours of tide to Dartmouth. So we've got 6 hours of tide and close haul towards Dartmouth. Does that make sense?
Yes, thanks. That's great.
Yeah, I actually did the Alderney to Dartmouth last year and crossed the traffic separation scheme. And I can tell you, I saw one boat going one way and then one boat going the other way. It was more a case of dodging French trawlers in the middle. But we crossed it as you say, obviously at right angles. So
yeah, and if the wind's going east or west, then it's easy.
It's a long schlep, and obviously short-handed. If you're going too far, of course, it obviously can take you a lot longer to get there.
Do you get the tides right around here?
Yeah, there's enough.
Because what it gives you one way, it takes away the other way. So that 20 miles either way isn't actually distance. It's just tide giving and taking. Happy days, guys.
Good.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, stop me recording now. I hope.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Catch you later. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thanks, Mike.
Cheers, Mike. Cheers, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Bye now.
Mike, I missed the first bit.